good? Matt Clark here at the new Matt Clark. How are each and every one of you doing on this amazing Monday? I'm doing great. My girl's doing great. My family's doing great. Hope each and every one of you are doing great despite the crazy times that we're living in. If you could please hit that like button. If you could please hit that subscribe button and that bell notification button so you get all my videos when they're new. If you could share with somebody on social media, help spread the message, help spread the word, that'd be amazing. And there's a PayPal option if you'd like to donate, help support the channel. The link is in the description of all of my videos. So what's up, what's up, what's up? Happy Monday. How are each and every one of you doing in this beautiful new week? It's starting to get cold. It's getting dark earlier. And we know winter's coming. And I'm not a fan, but it is what it is. So I figured it's been a minute since I've done any top fives or lists like that. So today I'm going to do my 6 personal worst days or times in prison. It's pretty much days, you know what I mean. Sometimes it can stretch for a couple days or whatever, right? I've done a lot of time in my life, but these 6 days stood out to me specifically and for many different reasons. And a lot of the time it may not even be the reason why you think why that day was so hard for me, but we're gonna get into that right now. So the number 6 worst day for me in prison is Christmas Day any year of any bit. Now, of course you're away from your family. I'm a family-oriented guy, so that's not easy to begin with, but that's not really the reason why I say it's so difficult for me. Being a family-oriented guy, I was one of those guys that never brought crime to my house, didn't really crap in my own backyard. So a lot of the time, my family never saw me at my worst. So they would be surprised at first when I was getting these long sentences. And the more I got, the more times I went in prison, the more used to it they got. And every year, those calls got a little bit more difficult. Now, for me, it was hard because it was the one time of the year where I couldn't hide and I couldn't duck my head in shame from my family members. I had to call, I had to face them, and I had to hear their personal disappointment in me and my behaviors. And for me, the fact that you're not home for the holidays is hard enough as it is, not being around your loved ones. On top of that, feeling their disappointment and their sadness that you're not there makes it even harder, makes it even more difficult to deal with. And I came from a family of pretty square people, and they really didn't cope with it well. My sister had a lot of personal beefs with me when we were younger. We get along great now, but it was difficult considering all the things that had happened in my house. There was definitely some resentment, and I would feel it on the holidays. So my number 6 worst day in prison was Christmas any year. Number 5 worst day in prison for me was the time I was on range where somebody was murdered. Now, I'd been through a lot of violence in my years. I'd seen a lot of stabbings, I'd seen a lot of beatings, I'd seen a lot of jumpings, and sometimes they feel like they're getting out of hand. Sometimes it looks really bad, but typically people survive, especially in jail and in prison, because healthcare is typically right there. But when you see somebody after they've had their head stomped in, just thrown at the front of the range like a piece of trash, and I'm not saying this guy was a good person. I don't know him like that. If you look at his history, didn't look like it was so good. He was a bit of a bully. I still don't think that you deserve to be killed like that, but it is what it is, right? But for me, there was a couple realizations. First of all, I had almost got into it with the same dudes, couple of the same dudes from that group, and I had almost got jumped like a week prior. So that quickly runs through your mind like, wow, you know? And then there's the fact that the realization that you just watched somebody get killed and it ain't even bothering you that much. That's not easy to deal with when you come to the realization that you lack empathy for people, that over the years, your soul has been tainted by all the crap and all the negativity and all the shit that you go through when you're caught up in the system, that I had literally lost empathy for people. And it took a lot of coming to grips to try to shed that negative institutionalized attitude where everything is just the worst and you're just prepared for whatever. It's not good to think like that, because then you're prepared for whatever. You understand? And it's good in terms of safety and being ready, but if you're out of that life, you know, there could be times where you have to defend yourself and you need to be ready, but for the most part, you don't really need that in everyday life. And when you try to feel empathy for people in the regular everyday society, it can be difficult to garner that from me at times, and that's just something that I have to deal with. That's something that happened to me from years and years and years of incarceration. So the number 5 worst time for me was the time I was on range in the Don jail where somebody was murdered. The number 4 worst time for me was my first day on TIAC 7D 1998 as this suburban white kid who hadn't even really met any gangsters in my life, thrown to the wolves on 7D, and it wasn't easy to start. I definitely had to stand up for myself right off the bat, and believe me, I was scared. I was terrified. I was in a different world, something I had never experienced before, and very quickly I grew up because I realized that if I didn't, then I was going to be prey, and I wasn't prepared to be that. It's just not my personality. It's not who I am. I'm going to survive in any situation you put me to the best of my ability, no matter how dangerous. I'm going to try to keep myself safe. It just is what it is. It's just who I am, which is why I was able to survive 17 solid years in prison. And I guess I'm lucky for that. So the number 4 worst time for me, my first day TIAC 7D, wasn't easy. People came at me, people tried to punk me off, and if it wasn't for a guy that I had grown up with, afterwards, he's from the same town as me. We had known, I had heard of him before, but I never personally knew him. And he actually saved me, man, from getting punked off by a big group of gang members that I had no idea what I was getting into. So, shout out to Newmarket. The number 3 worst day that I ever had in prison was day 55 of LOAP, loss of all privileges, provincial segregation. Day 55 straight. So there's like a day between, but by day 55, I was talking to myself. You're alone with your thoughts for days and days and days, beating yourself up about the stupid decisions you're making. And the thing is, when you're in prison or in jail, you get healthy really quick. You're eating properly, you're working out, so your mind gets clear really quick. And then you tend to focus on all the bad decisions you made because clearly you're smarter than that. And you know it when you're level-headed and you're thinking clearly. And that's a difficult thing to go through, man. It's a difficult thing to come to grips with time and come to grips with being away from life for these huge stretches of time. And when you're in segregation, locked away with just your mind, keep in mind, loss of all privileges, no mattress from 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., no books, no phone calls, metal hatch closed on the door. You can have a pencil and a piece of paper and a Bible. That's it. And I ain't reading the Bible. It's just not who I am. So by the end of it, I'm smacking pieces of paper off the wall, talking gibberish to myself, and just being straight up crazy. Getting used to hearing everybody scream every single night. Ah! Ah! It just makes you mad. Segregation is difficult, man. And being in segregation in the federal system where you have your TV and your stereo and all that stuff, that's soft. I could do 6 months, 8 months, a year standing on my head. Provincial, locked away from all human contact, it's crazy, man. It gets to you. Gets to you. I'm ADD case too, So, it's like you can literally watch the seconds tick. Tick, tick, tick. That's how slow your day goes. It's crazy. Number 3, worst time for me in prison, day 55 of LOPE, loss of all privileges, segregation, provincial, Lindsay jail, like 2003. Horrible. The number 2 worst time for me when I was locked up, or worst day for me in prison, was the day that I lost my grandmother. Now, clearly losing any family member is difficult. You never want to do that. But I had a very close bond, all of us did, with this specific grandmother. We all love both grandmothers, but it was a lot closer with this grandmother. And losing her and knowing that she died thinking of me as just this 2-bit thug, somebody who's just throwing my life away, stealing from everybody, stealing from my family, even stole from her when I was really young. And it breaks me up to this day thinking that that's the last match she knew me as. She left me $10,000. I blew through it in like 6 or 7 weeks on junk. And I'm still ashamed to it to this day. She gave me and left me that so I could make beginnings in my life, or progress at the beginnings of my adult life. And I squandered it. I showed her a lack of respect. And it's something that I'm going to live with for the rest of my life. It just is what it is, you know. Family means everything to me. And knowing that I ashamed myself to this specific grandmother, and I never had a chance to make amends, to really clear the air with her. Like, we were cool, don't get me wrong, but I never grew up. I was never able to sit down and talk to her and just kind of explain what I went through so she could understand. You know, I was never able to have that moment because I kept getting myself locked up time and time and time again. These are some of the things that you take for granted. Your family members even being there. That's something that anytime you go to prison, there's a risk of you losing opportunity to be there if something was to happen. Because we all know it. Anything can happen at any time. And somebody with a record like mine is not going or being allowed to go to any funeral. Too much of an escape risk. It's never going to happen. And I was 100% denied. And it breaks me up to this day. The number 2 worst day of prison for me was losing my grandmother while I was locked up. Now, I've had many, many, many bad days in prison. But my absolute worst time in prison wasn't about going or experiencing violence or going through like hunger strikes or riots or fighting. No. The worst for me, the absolute worst time, was coming in my last bit, wired on number 4, number 3, smashing, just destroying my life, 168 pounds, mohawk in my head, losing my mind, 14 straight days of withdrawals, no sleep, and really no relief except for one time a homie of mine sent something for me. He said, look, man, stretch that as long as you can. Get a night or 2 sleep because it's going to be a rough go. I was coming off a rough bender, and there's no way that I was going to get through it. I'm telling you, there's nothing worse than going through withdrawals in jail. All day long, you're slumbering around like you're going to die. You're going to fall over. Like all you need to do is get to your bed and you can sleep. Then as soon as those cells crack and you lay down in your bed, you're wide awake. And when you do finally fall asleep, it's a plastic mattress, so it makes you sweat. You wake up all soaked in your sweat, freezing. You got no pillow. Your neck's kinked. Food is horrible. You got to deal with a cell partner despite the fact that you're just on the verge of losing your mind because you're going through withdrawals, yet you can't really defend yourself because you're weak. And this time was the first time when I was in jail, I didn't get the initial respect when I came in. Most people didn't even recognize me. When you come in as a junk like that, you're not getting the respect. You got to earn your respect. And it took me putting my weight back on and throwing some fists before I got it. And it was hard for me, man. It was hard for me going through that in prison. I remember I had this dream almost every night. I watched the movie 28 Weeks Later. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a zombie movie. And in that movie, the father zombie chases his kids. Like he's out to get his kids. He's supposed to be brainless and not know what's going on, but for some reason, he's out to get his own kids. I saw this zombie in my dreams for like a month. I would have dreams of syringes dancing in my head. It was crazy, man. Lights are always on. You hear that from fluorescent lights. Something that just never goes away. It's crazy. The number one worst time for me, 2015, coming in off of heroin, coming in off of cocaine, and shaking it rough. Obviously, I share my stories with you guys, so you guys don't have to go through these things yourselves. If I could snap my finger, nobody's addicted to drugs. Nobody has to go to prison. Nobody has to break the law because everybody's good. That's what I do, but that's not a reality, especially in 2021. It's hard out here, and it seems to me like the world just keeps getting crazier and crazier. So, things can land you in jail. And hopefully by doing my videos, I give people enough information that when they go in, they're not green. They don't make time more difficult for the guys that are already there, and they don't get themselves hurt. And for the guys that are in there, guys aren't coming in without any knowledge at all of how to behave or how to move. And hopefully it can make better for them. And then also just show, man, that prison's not worth it. It's not worth it. There's so many days I could pick out as the worst days. There's a lot of reflecting, man. A lot of looking at how many failures you've had in your life. And that's not easy when you're somebody who's ambitious or at least thinks they are. Love each and every one of you. The New Matt Clark.